Hey, good morning. It's Tom at Wild Willies Performance Auto and Truck. A customer brought in a 2000 Land Rover Discovery 2. She said it was smoking, and that's about all the information I've got as far as diagnosing what's wrong. Opened the hood. The coolant was empty. Didn't see anything on the ground. So the first thing we're going to do is try to get a diagnostic on it, a walk around, and let's just start with the basics. 2000 Land Rover Discovery 2. It is advanced. It's got the active cornering enhancement. It's been upgraded to 245/75 16s. Old man Amigo suspension. It's got a wilderness rack. Other than that, it's pretty well stocked K&N air filter. It's been to our shop a lot of times since it was new over the years. Good car. It's got 217,000 miles. Doesn't use any oil, but this is an aluminum 4.0 engine, so heating and cooling and lubrication is key for the aluminum motor. Otherwise, you have head gasket problems and limit the useful life of the motor. In any event, I'm going to get this thing warmed up, and we'll get started. Okay, so we've got the motor started up, and it's about 45-50 degrees. The first thing I wanted to check was if it was fogging out of the tailpipe. So at 45 degrees, there's no fog coming from the tailpipe, which my first suspicion was that it might be a head gasket or something internal in the 4.0, because typically on these Land Rovers, if they do get a heating issue, they're prone to blowing a head gasket or warping a head, that kind of thing. So there's no steam in the exhaust. The chief complaint here is that there was a loss of coolant, and they've been adding coolant over time. There's never any fluid on the ground, and the overflow tank constantly has to be refilled. So as you can see, there's nothing in the overflow tank. First thing I'd like to do is verify that there's no blow-by or compression coming out of the overflow tank. This line here is the return line coming from the motor. This goes to the radiator top, and of course the bottom line that goes through the radiator, and then the supply line that goes through the manifold. And what I like to do is just see that there's coolant in the hoses. So even though the overflow tank is empty, we know that there's coolant in the radiator. A quick look underneath, and there's no actual loss of coolant, no visible signs of coolant, but there is a lot of moisture. There's if you look at the fan cowling, there's a lot of coolant that's built up. So a couple of things: there's coolant on top of the oil can that's cooled, so that makes me believe that it's a heating issue that's intermittent. Could be a pinhole in a hose. It could be a number of things, but that indicates to me that it's only doing it once the motor's run or when it's got a load. So I'm going to let this thing get up to temperature, and then we'll see what that brings. Okay, so bringing this Land Rover up to operating temperature, the first thing I noticed is that that we've got several indicator lights on the dash. The first thing is that our ABS light comes on with the ignition, but it stays on, and that means that it's receiving a signal from the ABS and the computer that something's wrong. The next thing that you'll notice is the hill descent light is on, and it stays on, as well as the traction control. The service engine light soon is on, but I'll get to that later. The three lights, as far as the ABS, traction control, and hill descent control, are known as the three Amigos, and that can come from a mechanic that didn't know what they were doing when they did the brake job, They failed to reset the codes in the computer once the brakes were done. It can be from a warped rotor. It can also mean that the system's not functioning at all, and that's what happens oftentimes when you've got warped rotors. The sensors pick up a harmonic, and it'll trip those lights, and the computer overrides it. So those the traction control, hill descent control don't function as long as it's throwing a code. The ABS will still work, and I think they did that as far as safety is concerned. But this car will not, in 4 high or 4 low, engage the traction control as long as those codes are being thrown. Now, we're still working on assessing, the heating up problems and the loss of coolant. This is subtle. I mean, this car will run down the highway and it'll idle and this, that, and the other, but what happens is the coolant level gets down and the car overheats, obviously. So the first thing I'm looking for is, while the engine warms up, is the service engine light has not gone out. And that could be quite a few things. What we're going to do later is plug in the computer, the code reader, and see what codes are thrown. And I'll go through that in another video. The service engine light could mean a mixture problem. It could mean it could be a myriad of other problems. But the fact that the service engine soon light is on means that we've got to dig a little bit deeper. So as our operating temperature is about at normal, and we don't seem to be having any heating problems. The motor sounds good. It's still not fogging, so I'm ruling out head gasket or anything major. I'm going to go ahead and shut off the car and see if there's any pressure buildup of heat as we stop the water pump from circulating the coolant. Okay, so when the water pump goes off with the motor, immediately, now we haven't driven the vehicle, haven't put it under heavy load, but as the heat is dispersed through the coolant, I'm hearing an audible leak, and all I want to do is chase our hoses. If there's a pinhole in any of the hoses, you're gonna find as it heats up. It's going to go ahead and start releasing that pressure. Like I said, this vehicle has 217,000 miles. Hasn't had any major work done. We've done some hoses, an extra coolant tank, and so forth. And it looks like I found our culprit. What's happening, it looks like, is that a clamp from the return line, the clamp seems to be okay. If I put some pressure on that hose, I'll hear an audible. I don't know if you can hear that or not, but when I press on the clamp of that hose, it's emitting coolant on it, but only when I press on it, put a little bit of pressure. So that's our leak, and what's happening is very simply that we need to just, for the customer's sake, there's enough hose there. What I'm going to do is just cut the end off the hose, replace the clamp, and that should stop our leak. They should stop going through coolant, and this repair at our shop at least is only going to be about $35. So we're going to go ahead and tighten that clamp, cut the hose off, and I'll let you know if that's all. Okay, we went ahead and cut the hose and reinstalled the clamp, and we're not getting that pinhole leak anymore. Excuse me, that sure will get you. In any event, I wanted to talk a little bit about burping the cooling system. So what I've done is we filled up the reservoir with Prestone, and we're letting the motor get to operating temperature And as you can hear, there will be a bubbling sound as the motor runs. And if you don't do this, what you'll do is you'll trap air in the system, and when you come back to check the fluid, it'll be gone, or it'll be lower than when you left it. So as you can hear, that as the motor warms up, you'll hear a bubbling, and that's the air, and it's coming out very hot. And why it's popping like that is you've got warm or cool water going through the heads and through the intake, and it's coming out very hot, and of course it's hitting cooler water. And sometimes it'll do a little bit of steaming. Now you don't want to just take this cap off when it's hot, obviously for safety reasons, but as you can see, that air returning. So what we're doing is we want to let this run until all them bubbles, or at least 90% of them, are gone. Now, we don't want this to boil over and we'll lose coolant on the ground, but once that bubbling subsides, we're going to go ahead and make sure that it's back to the cold level as indicated on the tank, and replace the cap, let it cool down, and add any fluid that's necessary. But this is a step that's required to get the air out of the cooling system. On the old cars, you had a radiator that you open. You fill the radiator up and you put the cap back on. But when you have coolant running through the entire the plenum and up, down, sideways, over and around to an overflow or a coolant reservoir, a lot of air will get trapped in there, obviously. So I'm going to go ahead and let this thing get to operating temperature, get all them bubbles out, and let her cool down, and we'll be ready to go.